Hi, Geoff. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, David. Glad to be here with you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So, where are you calling into from today?
I am in Long Island, New York, right in the heart of Nassau County, east of Brooklyn, in a little town called Massapequa.
Okay, I've actually been to Long Island visiting some potential clients at the I think the far near the eastern tip.
Yeah, the island's a great place. It's got something for everybody. Um, the traffic is terrible, as it is around any major metro. It used to be that if you were reverse commuting into the city from the island, it was fine, but now everywhere is congested. But I take that as a good sign. People like living here.
Yep, I would agree. Now, are you a native of Long Island?
From Connecticut originally, and found my way to Long Island when my wife and two kids and I were looking for a place to call home.
Oh, that's awesome. So, tell me about your company. Um, I see you're involved in several things, but let's talk about White Tiger. So,
Sure.
where'd the name come from? What do you guys do? How to
Sure.
get started?
Sure. So the name comes from the martial arts. I practiced tiger style martial arts. It saved my life on more than one occasion. That's a story for another day. Um, but as a way of showing respect to everything I had learned in the martial arts, which is not only things which are self-defense oriented, but definitely things that one can use in the boardroom as well. Decided to name the company after the tiger style. And so what we do, so we are, as of today, January 16th, 2024, we're about a 4.5-year-old company, founded in August of 2019, right before COVID started. And
Yep.
we do pretty much everything for public accounting firms except for public accounting.
Okay.
Found our way into this space from the recruiting ecosystem. So my background is I did executive recruiting for venture and private equity backed tech companies when I started my career, and started my firm, as I said, 4.5 years ago. And we started off as just a recruiting firm doing mostly middle market recruiting, David, for financial services and tech companies. And very shortly after founding, I was blessed to be introduced to an emeritus PwC guy who, in his retirement, was doing strategy work for $100 million public accounting firms. So uh,
Okay.
companies like Marks Paneth, which was recently acquired by CBiz, Friedman, which was recently acquired by Markham, Anshin Block and Anshin, PKF O'Connor Davies. These were really prestigious 9-figure public accounting firms in the New York metro area. And he did two things for these clients. He did executive recruitment for them, and he also did mergers and acquisitions for them. And so I came in with him to help him with his partner level recruiting projects for those large accounting firms. And I got to ride shotgun to him on some very cool M&A projects, learn how to do diligence, learn how to do integration, learn what not to do. And there are plenty of things that we should all avoid in an M&A capacity. And haven't looked back. So that mentor of mine, he retired to Israel. He's safe and sound in Tel Aviv today. And my business partner and I, she's in Georgia, I'm here in New York. We decided we wanted to be subject matter experts in accounting, and we haven't looked back. So just a few short years ago, but we've built a pretty formidable practice doing recruiting and M&A and consulting for accounting firms in the last 3 years.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's a great overview, and I love the niche focus. Right. So many search firms, you ask them, what specialization they have, and they're like, oh no, we do everything, any industry, secretaries to CEO of a Fortune 10 company. We just do it all. Just call us with anything, which means you call them with nothing.
I like the niche. It's I can appreciate the diversity because you want to, I guess for me personally, I never want to get bored. I always want to stay, stimulated and having fun. But all people are different. So I might talk to 10 or 15 accounting firm owners a day, which we usually do. And every single one of those conversations is vastly different. So I have a lot of
Okay,
fun with it.
that's awesome. So, myself and my listeners love case studies. So can we go through two or three examples? And I understand if you'll need to keep the names anonymous, but through these case studies, let's give examples of the type of projects you all are really well positioned to take on.
Sure. So I'll start with a recruiting project, and then I'll go to two M&A projects.
Okay.
Um, and then we'll talk maybe just briefly about consulting at the end. So there's a lot of talk about the talent crisis in accounting today. That's a really big thing. One of the mechanisms that I've seen a lot of success in is hiring remote employees. It doesn't mean that in office staff is a thing of the past, but I think that business owners, accountants in particular, because there are simply not enough accountants in the sector. I've read statistics like 80% of CPAs are retiring by 2031. I don't know if I believe that. I think that's maybe a little far-fetched, but needless to say, there are not enough young people to do the mid-level work, and there are not enough college people to do the low-level work, and there are not enough hungry and competent middle-aged people to do the higher work.
Yep.
So, we have to be creative. So, a lot of my clients will say, well, it sounds great, but it can't be done. And I have one client, which is an example of the opposite. They're about a 50-person firm based in a major metro area. They exclusively do tax work for ultra high net worth individuals. So personal tax, no entity tax on families that have more than 9 figures in wealth.
Okay.
And they are a 100% remote company.
Yeah. And I love the niche. I love the niche focus.
Totally niche focused. Yeah. Which I think, is great. And I don't think it's required that accounting firms be totally niche. But it certainly helps, right? And, that's another topic. But so we were engaged by them to find them a strong manager, senior manager who had experience working with clients at that level in a tax capacity and had the cultural gravitas that they could be a self-starter, which is necessary in a remote environment. You can't have somebody who is not motivated, not self-motivated. And it took us about 90 days, and we found a phenomenal person on the opposite coast who 7 months later is still very happy. And I know that they're happy, and the client is happy because they engaged us for a second project a couple of weeks ago.
That's awesome.
So that's great.
So I'm just curious about that project.
Sure.
So being on opposite coasts, does the person ever meet in person with the team, or has it always been remote? Did they come to New York to interview, or to the East Coast to interview?
So I think that I think they do a once annual offsite, but there was no in-person interviewing at all. I have to say, I think their interviewing process is something that other firms should follow. It was so crisp and neat. They had people, subordinates of this person, contemporaries of this person, and seniors of this person, as well as HR, interviewing them in 20 to 25-minute blocks and 60 to 90-minute meetings. And it was just so crisp, and it left the candidate feeling really taken care of, and like this firm had their act together. And a lot of candidates are repelled from accounting firms because it's it can feel very chaotic. Interviewing process, which I understand. You're managing internal stakeholders, your own concerns, but this firm just did a phenomenal job.
That is awesome. Offline, I may want to get an introduction from you to this firm.
Sure.
because many of our clients would fall into that category.
Oh,
That may
yeah.
be a fit for this, and I'm not really aware of another firm that has that that has that focus. So that's really interesting, because it's I heard somebody just say that Zoom is not a communications platform, it's a transportation alternative platform.
I
It's a
like
way
that.
to travel anywhere in the world from without leaving your desk.
And within a few years, and this, we're not talking about technology, but beam me up, Scotty. The Star Trek
Yeah,
hologram. It's it's a slow walk to our craziest imagination. So I have conversations regularly with guys and gals who are in their 70s and talk about how their father or mother retired from the business when usually it's father. In the 19, whatever, the invention of the calculator, even,
yeah,
forget about the computer, but the calculator. So, it's, we're going through leaps and bounds of change. I think the change is happening faster than it's ever happened. And, innovator or perish, is the truth.
sure. I remember when I started Arthur Anderson in Houston in 1987, that there were partners there who remembered when it was mandatory to wear a hat to work. Like
Oh,
when you
wow.
think about movies from like the 30s, 40s, 50s, men, that was just part of their attire, right? It's part of the suit. And if they're in a tuxedo, then they had, a more formal hat. But like, have you ever seen the show Leave It to Beaver?
Yeah.
The father would come home, he would, always take the hat off. And
Hang it up. Yep.
so it's interesting just to see, the changes. And so, yeah, so that is interesting. Okay, so that's on the recruiting front. Let's talk about some of the M&A stuff. M&A always sounds sexier than recruiting. So
It does, and it's David, it's it sounds sexier, it seldom is. So first I'll share with you kind of a war story, and then I'll share with you one which is probably about as sexy as it sounds. So one of the major things that my firm does now is there's a lot of non-accounting buyers of accounting firms.
yep, I've heard that.
So we certainly, so there's, I guess there's kind of four classifications for buyers. One would be the small accounting firm buying an even smaller accounting firm.
Yep.
One would be the regional or national accounting firm buying a smaller accounting firm. Then you have the financial services firm buying an accounting firm, which has really emerged onto the scene in a very big way in the last 12 months. And I think we're going to continue to see velocity there. And it's a topic that I'm fascinated with and would love to talk more about it. And then the fourth is more of the private equity buyer. And a lot of firms are too small to really, or too, you have to either be a certain level of size and a certain level of niche to draw interest from the private equity buyer.
What's a typical, let me just interrupt. What's a typical size or metric in either partner count or revenue size to have interest from a PE buyer?
It's much more driven by EBITDA and gross revenue secondarily than it is partner count or staff operating model of the firm. I mean, a lot of people will say 3 million in EBITDA is the number. I think it's a little less than that. The reason why that number is considered market standard is because below that number in free cash flow, the burden of replacing the C-level people who may or may not be retiring, as well as other critical people in the organization, engaging consultants and vendors to backfill. It makes the unpredictability of what you're buying too risk heavy if you don't have enough freestanding cash to justify whatever changes could be necessary if things go belly up for the buyer.
Okay.
And then, gross top line, we like, and this is more of an objective comment. We like to see firms that are kind of the healthy class of firms are doing north of 40% EBITDA. 30 to 40 is considered, moderate, acceptable to a lot of buyers for sure. And then, less than 30% EBITDA and, it's considered that you have room for improvement. Doesn't mean nobody will buy your practice. A lot of people buy houses that need some work.
Sure.
It just, kind of at the objective level, how the market is looked at. Financial services are very interested in, as you can imagine.
The clients probably.
Well, very interested in the clients, tax-driven firms, I was going to say,
Right.
because, the clients, exactly to your point, there's a significant cross and upselling opportunity for them. It's not that they're opposed always to accounting work, CFO work, bookkeeping, entity work, but and financial services firms can sell employee benefit plans. They can sell all kinds of vehicles that are beneficial to an entity. And if you have CFO level relationship, great. But the main vehicle for driving revenue to most financial services firms, at least that I've worked with successfully, is their asset management capability. And one of the reasons it's sexy, not only for the buyer, but for the seller as well, to consider, if you have a tax-driven practice, to consider selling to a financial services firm, is because we're in the largest wealth transfer in history, as all of the baby boomers in all categories are preparing to exit trillions of dollars to their to their heirs. The 4th or 5th generation family office client that you're working with may not have a successor. And if your clients are planning a liquidity event, you, as the person with all of that relationship equity, Mr. Accountant, has the opportunity to participate in some of your clients' liquid assets being managed by your financial advisory buyer. And there's some nuances legally to how you can collect on that. But they are surmountable nuances. So there's a lot of synergy, especially if you have clients who are impending an exit or are on the higher net worth side, for partnering with a financial advisory firm in an M&A capacity. And that is actually the first scenario I want to talk about, David. So I have a financial advisory client in the Northeast.
Like traditional financial advisory, AUM driven, comprehensive wealth management.
Exactly. They're a 4-partner consortium inside of a 400 advisor RIA.
Okay.
And phenomenal culture, really nice guys. And they had tapped a young guy who was working on a trading desk for them to go and get his CPA license. So this young guy at the age of 29 is a CPA. He's built organically $150,000 book of tax business, both individuals and entities, nothing crazy, very smart, very motivated. And they were looking for a practice for him to acquire, so that, them participate in the acquisition, help him fund it. And obviously the channel opportunity on both sides. So my firm found a firm with a little less than $1 million in revenue. It's in a very affluent town in the Northeast, and perfect synergy. Owner's retiring, made a lot of sense. Younger partner was at this firm as well. And, the younger partner was not going to be the successor to the older guy, was more of a back office person than a rainmaker, if you will. Very competent, but back office. And it was perfect. And 6 to 8 months later, just a few of the hiccups that occurred, the young guy, once we started conversations and it got real to him that in his mid-30s, he would be going through a transfer of some kind, he left the accounting firm and took the largest client with him, and did that because he actually went in-house. He joined them. And it's a name that everybody listening to this podcast will know, and I will, of course, not breach confidentiality and share it, but mega client,
Mhm.
perhaps a good career move for him, perhaps not, the younger guy. Totally convoluted the situation. And it just made a lot of other hairy bats come out of the bag. But as of last Friday, that deal finally closed, half the size of what we thought it was going to be. I guess bragging about myself for a minute, one of the things that I do that's a little different than other brokers in the market, David, is I am a neutral referee to these transactions.
Okay.
Most brokers will either just represent the buyer or the seller. My firm represents both parties. We take
Okay.
half of our fee from both parties.
Interesting.
And we do that because in accounting and accounting M&A specifically, unlike say real estate or manufacturing, where you have very hard asset driven purchases, what someone is buying in accounting is an intangible asset. They're buying a book of relationships
Mhm.
and the perception of value. There's nothing tying the client to your firm except for goodwill. So
Right.
because of that, in traditional transactions, the seller is expected in the open market to bear the majority of the burden on M&A.
Right. Yeah, it's usually done on more like an earn-out type basis.
Exactly, and tied to collection. So with that in mind, it's really important that, in my opinion, if I was selling a firm, I would want an advisor, a broker, whatever you want to call it, whose success was tied to my success. So not only do we take half of our fee from each party, David, we take our fee pro rata as the seller is being exited. So
Okay.
unless the seller receives their maximum earnout, we don't get our payment.
I see. Interesting. So it also motivates you to hang around after the transaction closes.
Yes, sir. We are we are, and there's no consulting fee associated with that. That's part of, we really look at ourselves as advisors, and we try to put ourselves in the shoes of you accountants who everybody wants a slice of the pie, right? You guys get hit up by bankers, by lawyers, by financial advisors, by
Sure.
consultants, because you've got great relationships with your clients. So I guess it's our way of saying, we don't want to treat you like everybody else does. We want to be, very motivated by your success rather than, just what you can give to us.
That makes sense. Wow, I've got so many follow-up questions. So one was I was curious about, when I came into the profession, the normal rule of thumb was when it came to profits, they called it the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 model that you've probably heard of, where a third of the revenue goes to pay the staff to have the work done, a third goes to pay overhead, and a third goes to profit. And my friends that I have in public accounting, my sense is that for a lot of firms, that's drifted down from, a 33% EBITDA to more like 25%. And then the other thing was it was a third, a third, a third, and then an average firm was worth 1 times revenues or 3 times EBITDA. I mean, it was just nice, easy rule of thumb. So you've answered my first question that apparently some of the folks I know that are partners in CPA firms, maybe they're not in the top quintile in performance by their peer group. If you know firms that are, approaching 40% EBITDA margins. So that's the first thing. And then the second is, what are the multiples then? Typically, what are the ranges either on an EBITDA or total or gross revenue?
So I'm going to try to answer the question in a gigantic circle that adds the most value to your network.
Perfect. Perfect. I like it when guests take my clumsy question and go ahead and answer the question I meant to ask.
Not at all. It's
all right. So go ahead.
Thank you. So the first thing is, if you are planning to sell your firm in the next decade, and a lot of people won't like what I'm about to say, but it is the truth. The very first thing that you should do right now today is you should start thinking about making your firm as remote as possible. Now, what do I mean by that? I don't mean you have to take all your in-office employees and let them work remotely. What I really mean is about your client's behavior. if you have clients who are coming in to meet with you at your office, if you have clients that are physically dropping off paperwork, unless they are clients that are very niche and very high value to your firm, which is a strong exception to the rule, which I am sharing, you really should be working towards training your clients into the behavior where they are remote, where they do not need to see you. You know, if they're older and they don't like the computer and they want to mail you all their documents, that's better than them coming into the office to drop it off. Best of all is if they're using a portal. A Zoom meeting, as David and I were saying at the beginning of this call, can go a long way, especially if you're working with an $800 1040, right? Sure. If you've got a $10,000 1040, or if you've got, you know, something, you've got a lot of K1s, or you have complex audit work, or you have serious CFO work that you do for clients, there's exceptions to this rule, but understand that buyers, if they are not in your backyard, are very seldom going to be interested in purchasing a firm which, from a client perspective, involves a lot of physical collateral. So if you're looking at a sale in the future, the biggest thing that you can do to help yourself down the road is starting to train your clients on remote behavior. The more remote client behavior you have, the more salient your firm is, even if you have a 25 or a 20 or a 15% EBITDA. So that's the
I like it. And it makes so much sense. I can understand it open. Yeah. So it makes all the sense in the world. Okay. So you're saying even if you sacrificed EBITDA to get to that point, in the long run, it'll still be more valuable. A 15% EBITDA, totally remote firm is likely more valuable than a 25% EBITDA, all in person. The employees have to come in the office. The clients have to come into the office. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
More valuable, yes, but probably not for the reason you think. The firm that's 25% in EBITDA and 100% in office in its culture is probably going to be valued at zero. It's probably not going to be saleable. You know, unless you're talking about if your firm is $6 million and $1.5 million of that is EBITDA, and it's split between two partners who are taking home $750,000 a year, including ad backs, and the rest of the staff and the real estate and the technology makes up the $4.5 million in spend, I could sell that firm. But if you're saying a $25 million firm is one guy who's running $1 million book of business, and he's taking home $250 a year, including everything, and his practice is, you know, he's kind of a slave to his practice.
Yeah, that's not worth anything.
I'm going to have a really hard time selling that to anybody. Now, that guy that I just mentioned, his dream is usually to have me hire someone who wants to sit in his chair. But understand this. Number one, there are very, very few talented, young, hungry people in accounting, period, let alone somebody who has that profile and wants to inherit your mess. Very politely, I say that to you honestly. So, you know, these are things that we can talk about, you know, but I'll always be honest. I never want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I don't want to waste your time either.
Yeah, that's that makes a lot of sense. So about the only way that practice is really sellable is if he happens to know a guy in town who has a similar type practice that's maybe a little bigger, that, you know, that happens to be like down the street, similar enough clientele, and they basically will take the practice off his hands, you know, make him a partner for a couple of years in their firm as he kind of does his phase out. Short of that, there's not even really an exit, is there?
It's possible. It is possible, but I would say less than a 10% chance. And that deal is mostly going to happen, I would say 99% of the 10% of the time that deal happens, David. It happens because the buyer and the seller have a relationship. They're golf buddies, they're cigar buddies, they're drink buddies, their wives are friends. You know, the wife being a friend is probably the most powerful. Because the deal from the buy side doesn't make sense. If I have a, let's say, $3 million firm with similar clients, but I have enough emotional capacity that I can absorb another $1 million in business, if I'm talking to, me, I'm not going to advise that person to take the practice, which is $1 million of chaos. I'm going to advise that person to let me start helping them develop a remote line of their business and to take something which is going to be massively streamlined. Now, let's talk for just a minute about overseas. Everybody is terrified of the overseas conversation when it comes to delivery, especially if you're in a tax business, because you have to inform clients that someone out of country will be working on your return. There's a tremendous amount of fear about it, David. In my experience, clients who make the transition lose less than 10% of their clients, and the 10% or less of their clients that they lose are clients who are the 80% of their headache anyway. Now, there's a major exception to this rule, in my professional opinion, which is you do not outsource work which is complex or high value. If it's over a $1,000 1040, you don't outsource it. If it's something that's more complex accounting work than simple bookkeeping, you don't outsource it. But if it's high volume, low value work, your valuable domestic people in this talent shortage market should not be working on high volume compliance work in any way, shape, or form. Those people should be retrained to be doing management of firms in, let's say, India, for example, to review the work that they do before it goes out the door. It can be done in environments that are equally secure as to here. That's objectively true. I know it scares everybody, but it's true. And the other thing is that it equips a firm to be looking at growth rather than just managing all of the chaos that's happening around them. So a major piece of what I just say, for example, would advise that $3 million firm to do instead of buying the $1 million firm is, if you start to rethink the way that your operating model is conducted, your M&A prospects become much more dynamic. You have more internal capacity. You have the ability to acquire firms that are 100% remote today already. I can't tell you how many $500,000, $1 million fully remote firms are on the market in specific niches. And these aren't all people who are retiring. These are some people who don't want to do admin work, hiring and firing. They just want to sell business and serve clients all day. So they're looking to join up with another firm. And then the other thing is, if that 3 million firm takes my advice, he can actually acquire the $1 million book of business where everything's chaotic, but it's still essential. Then a part of that acquisition is going to be, well, Mr. $1 million firm, you have to now start training your clients into this behavior anyway, because nobody who I can get my hands on is going to have continuity in the in-person model for their low value clients. It just doesn't make sense. You're actually disrespecting yourself by doing it. You could talk all day about wanting to have a fantastic culture and provide a really warm and fuzzy feeling for your clients. But if you look at your balance sheet, your P&L, and you see you've got EBITDA that is not where you want it to be, you shouldn't be sacrificing your well-being for culture, right? There's a balancing act here, and I think we need to be realists about it.
That is so interesting. How well you understand the situation going on in these firms, even though you yourself are not a CPA, and I'm guessing never spent a day working in a CPA firm.
I couldn't do it. I couldn't do my simple 1040 to save my life, David.
Understood. So, man, we have really covered a lot. You'd mentioned the final piece, the consulting piece, that you may have an example of that.
Sure. So let's see. I'll tell you, this is a great example. I'll tell you about someone who decided not to work with me recently on the consulting side. So this is a lovely woman in a rural part of the country. She runs about a $500,000 firm. And by the way, my clients predominantly range in size between as low as 100,000 in gross revenue, David, and up to about 10 to 15 million.
Okay.
I have relationships with firms larger than that, certainly, many of them, but because it's so hard to have advisory level influence at those larger firms, they just see me as totally transactional, which I love
Right.
making money, but it's not what gets me out of bed every day. So I like the smaller firms because we can have more impact there.
Yep, I understand.
So this woman runs a $500,000 firm, and she's in a tremendous amount of debt. And the reason that she's in so much debt is because she can't find talent. She doesn't like the outsourcing model. And the talent that she has found, David, has been people who, she'll hire them, she'll train them. Maybe they have some experience, maybe they don't. But then she ends up spending more time redoing their work than if she had just done the work herself to begin with.
Yep.
And this cyclical thing, which is happening where she places trust and hope in people and then gets burned, has manifested in her financial situation, and she's got a load of debt.
Right.
It's not insurmountable debt, but if I was to help her, it would take some significant movements on her part. Now, her client roster is perfect for implementing this overseas model that we've talked about. She has about a quarter of her practice is high value, and 3/4 of her practice is really volume. If we look at this with just business lenses on for a second. Doesn't mean she can't provide the clients with an excellent experience and Christmas cards, have a holiday party, a summer bash, be in the community with them. But when it comes to the workflow of, 30 to 50 meetings a week this woman is doing in office during tax season, she can't get any of her work done because her clients are explaining the documents that they bring into her that she could be done with in 20 minutes. So what I said to her is, what I will do in a consulting capacity is we're going to get into your firm and we're going to dissect everything. How is everything happening now? Where do we want to be from a financial aspect? And how can we get there without alienating the culture of your company? Because, especially in rural geographies, you guys, you actually care about people, which is a lost art in this world. I don't want to do that. That I'm not trying to be soulless about this. I want to respect you and enable you to treat your clients well without it being at your expense. That's really the goal here. And at the end of the day, she took the weekend. She spoke to her husband. She said, "This is a little bit too dramatic for me. I'm admittedly a little bit too afraid to do this. I appreciate your candor, but I'm going to have to figure out another way." And I said, that's fine, and I wish you all the best. I'm so glad, David, that we got to that outcome quickly, because where a lot of people would have taken her money or would have led her down, a rosy road, I was very honest with her. And, I think I was understanding as well. But, this woman needs someone to be truthful with her. She doesn't need more people to smoke. The consultant,
and it's sad. It's a really sad story because
it is, yeah.
Because if her clients understood how hard she worked, and she not only is not making money, she works hard and she's going backwards financially, they would offer to
rally around her, right?
Fees, right? They would. So that's and she's stuck. There's really no hope to get out. She's going to probably just work until she has a health issue. And that's a sad story.
And here, let's look at it and this is the last thing I'll say here. If we look at it from the client's perspective for just a second, all of us, I talk to so many accountants who don't like the overseas model, even for their high volume work. Because and I know I'm talking a lot about volume. It's a very different conversation on the niche side that maybe we'll talk about another day. But just to conclude, the irony is that there are very few firms, when this woman does eventually stop working, hopefully by her choice and not because she got sick, who will take and now manage these clients at anywhere near, even double the fee that this woman is charging. The regional firms are like 4 or 5 times this woman's rate is their minimum. Yeah, maybe 3 times if you'd be totally.
Yeah.
But 3 times is a minimum. So the irony is this woman's doing right by people. There's nobody else locally who can perform in the same way she can. She has like one competitor within like a 50-mile, one other accounting firm within a 50-mile radius of where she is.
Wow.
And it's a lot of people. I mean, it's not like a metro, but it's a lot of people
Sure.
that need accounting. So who are all these people going to be serviced by at the end of the day? H&R Block,
Yeah.
TurboTax, or it might not be what they want.
Who are all using either AI or overseas workers to have it done anyway.
And if this woman was doing the right thing, David, where in my opinion, where she could provide them essentially with the same service she's providing them now, rather than having them talk to someone over there. They're talking to her, they're interfacing with her, they're interfacing with her managed operation. But she's using this resource, and I lied. I will say one more thing. I am a red-blooded American. I believe in this country. I have very, very dear people in my life who fought for this country. I am not a veteran. I wish I actually would have rather gone into the military than do college. If I could do it again, I would do it that way. I would have learned more about the world, which would have benefited me in my 20s.
Sure.
But I believe that what made this country great in the 50s and 60s and 70s in the wake of World War II was the American spirit and this desire for the layman to move from the lower class into the middle class. It's what gave us all of our gusto as our economy became the strongest in the world. Now, we have a very different environment, but that human spirit is not lost. India is now the fastest growing economy in the world. And by no means am I saying I don't want, the United States to remain the main player. I do. I'm number one, USA. But we have to be realists, and there's not talent. We have no talent here. So anyway, that's my opinion on the topic.
No, that is really good. I cannot believe how the time has flown by. I have just 2 wrap-up questions. So give me the characteristics of a perfect client for you. And I'm going to kind of force you to like really narrow, like you can only pick one. And the reason this matters is because a week from now, when I forget a lot of the details of our conversation, give me the one thing to remember, the pain point, because we have hundreds of clients and they all have a CPA firm that we work with. So I know hundreds of CPA firms, and most of them are in that, $5 to $25 million size. So kind of in your sweet spot. So paint a picture for the person who you can best help and would most like to help.
So I have a prospect who's probably my favorite prospect. He does about 6 million in revenue. He wants to get to 30 million.
Okay.
He's 45 years old. He wants to sell at 60. So the next 10 years, his growth plan is 6 million to 30 million. And then he's going to ride the bus for 5 years. He wants to become an absentee owner, David. He wants to sit on a beach and run the firm from his cell phone and maybe a laptop for an hour or 2 a day and drink his margaritas and hang out with his family. And his practice is he has a couple of key niches, and he also does some volume work. So him and I are working together in a consulting capacity. We will be in short order. We have a great rapport. And in addition to the consulting work, I'm going to be doing transactional work for him. So hiring people fully remote domestically to help with some of these niche areas of growth, who will start off often as managers and ultimately become partners overseeing departments. And, we validate that by hiring people like I talked about with the first example, who have very strong character and are very self-motivated with a niche pedigree from a larger firm where they weren't treated well. There are people who exists. They're in the single digit percentile, but that's what we specialize in recruiting, finding those people. We'll be doing a strategic M&A for him. We'll be implementing overseas resourcing for him. So that's a client where I get to throw everything that I offer and the kitchen sink at him, and it adds value. And the biggest piece of it is that he has one partner who's more of a service partner, less of a strategist and senior partner. Even though they're 50-50 partners in the firm, he's really, to hear him talk about it, and I believe him based on our relationship, he's really the driver of the firm and its growth. The biggest thing of all in that situation is our relationship. We have mutual trust for each other, because in a retainer capacity, I'm not going to be taking a lot of money from him. My success is his success, and that's on recruiting, that's on M&A, that's on growth, top line and bottom line. And then I'm incentivized, of course, because 10 years from now, or 10 to 15, I'm going to sell his firm. And,
right.
I'm going to make millions of dollars selling this firm that I've helped him to grow. So
I love it. He sounds like a great client. So if I could distill what I think the elements are, it's a person, an ambitious person in the middle part of their career who wants to grow both personally and economically, and wants you as their key partner over the next 15 years to accomplish that.
One of them. I mean, I'm not Jesus Christ, David, but I appreciate the, to be trusted enough to be listened to as one of the people who they take seriously. That's correct.
Yeah, that is awesome. Well, as we wrap up, Geoff, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish I had?
No, this has really been a pleasure. Getting to talk about myself for a minute. So thank you for the opportunity.
My pleasure. If people want to learn more, where should they go? Where are you going to send them to? LinkedIn, your website?
Both is fine. So website is whitetigerconnections.com.
Mm-hmm.
And Geoff Bruskin, or you can find us at White Tiger Connections on LinkedIn too.
Perfect. Well, Geoff, this has really been fun. I really am excited about the stuff you're doing. And I think there are some synergies between our practices that I want to continue to explore in the future. So thanks for taking time, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. You too. And to your listeners. Bye-bye.
All right.